Hello, I'm Jacques Halbronn, and I would like to speak on French astrology and on the evolution of French astrology between the 60s and today. And I don't know exactly if you can compare that process with other countries, but you can consider what I tell you, and you can compare by yourself in your own land. So, I only speak for French astrology, as a matter of fact. It seems that the change of attitude towards astrology among astrologers has taken place in the 90s, that is about a quarter of a century ago, and ever since. And it is the change from theoretical astrology of engineers, toward a practical astrology, an astrology of technicians. French astrology in the 50s, 60s, 70s was in a sort of golden age, with the contribution of Michel Gauquelin in statistics and very ambitious attempts to reform astrology by Jean-Pierre Nicolas, by André Barbeau, and by myself, I would say, in the 60s, 70s. And also by an Italian astrologer whose name is Luisa Morpurgo, who died quite a few years ago, not very late. And those people, they were convinced that astrology has to have a significant structure, that to be symmetrical, it had to be mathematically organized. I'm not speaking here of the relationship between astrology and astronomy. I'm speaking here about the structure of the astrological knowledge itself. Rulerships, aspects, zodiac. There was an attempt to confer to astrology, through all chapters of the astrological knowledge, a certain coherence, a certain structure. What does that mean? That means that restructuring astrology, reconstituting astrology, restoring astrology to its original coherence, it was necessary to be conscious of what was wrong, what was incoherent, what was corrupted. What is a corrupted knowledge? It's corrupted knowledge is when you don't understand this knowledge, and when this knowledge is not understandable, which is more or less connected. When there are keys which are lost, and it's maybe not totally by chance, my book in 1976 was called Keys for Astrology, Play for Astrology, although it was included in a collection whose name was precisely Keys for whatever. So, when I entered astrology in the 60s, at the end of the 60s, 67, 68, 69, and I was persuaded that astrology was to be restored, that there were a necessary research about the foundations of astrology, the structure of astrology, and I was fascinated in particular by the rulerships. and I tried to find what was the inner system which was the basis of rulerships, the inner symbolical, mathematical, cyclical system. And I was convinced, naively, that if I would reach a sort of ideal reconstitution of the whole system, it would be adopted by astrologers. And that was not the case. And more generally, all the efforts which were made during this period have been forgotten, omitted, put aside. We can say that in 2014, what was made during the 60s, 70s, has been totally abandoned. And there is a return to an older tradition, to precisely the tradition which was supposed to be changed and transformed and restored and repaired. And what is in fact behind all this, even if it's not expressed that way, is that that was in vain. All these efforts were made in vain, and it was not good for astrology to change anything. And well, we might speak about certain failures of certain theoreticians who might have influenced this process. But I believe that sort of reasoning, argumentation of that sort, has to do with cooking. Suzel Fuso-Bresch, you might have heard of her, who was a scientist very much dedicated to astrology, believed in the 90s, precisely at this time of recession, of regression of astrology, when we passed from the astrology of theoreticians and structuralists to the astrology of practitioners and of cooks, we could say. And the idea was, let's take the astrologer as a whole. Let's take him with what he says, what he is using, and let's just wait, consider the results, the final results. And let's see how he deals with the results and how, what is the final work he's making. And it is to be compared to someone who say, well, you can discuss about the origin of the food, the origin of the meat, the origin of the fruits, the combinations of all this. The result is it good or not? Are people ready to buy it or not? This is the point. So it was a very pragmatical approach of astrology. Just see how it works. And finally, the idea was, France is a country of food, of wines, of cheeses. That is, things which have to be taken as a whole, with a very complex alchemy. And in alchemy, every element is important, or is supposed to be important, because it's a mixture. And you cannot change one factor without risking to compromise the result. So do not touch any element, and just let's keep the result, because the result is good, the result sells well, bankable, that's all. So when this sort of attitude has been prevalent, the research by itself was considered with a certain circumspection, with a certain doubt. But what could it be if you change this and this, if you move this and this, if you permute this and this, what will be the result? Will not, it could really produce a very regrettable result globally. And this change of attitude is also comparable to someone who doesn't know how his car works, how his TV works, how his computer works, but he sees that it works. But he would even be able, of course, to change or to improve the machine. He's not in position to do that. He just observes that it works. It's the consumer's point of view. Well, let us not deceive and disappoint the market. And this is a totally different approach, and the result of this change has been the rarefication of the recruitment of the new vocations for astrology. What happened with the new approach, with the newcomers from universities like me, like Loisel, like Lenoble, who consider astrology as a possibility of expression, of research. This has been totally abandoned. And now, today, there is nobody of that sort of profile, academic profile, who would dedicate himself to astrology, because astrology is now perceived and gives this image of a field which is completely fossilized, completely influenced by only commercial applications and only by results. The problem is, can we compare the word result? Is it possible to use the word result in astrology like we use it in technology or in medicine? Maybe in art, we could compare astrology with art. That is, oh, I like it, I buy it. That is the result. I like this music, I like this painting, I like this culture, I like this food, and I buy it. This is an artistical consideration. And there is, as a matter of fact, quite a classical definition of astrology as, at the same time, a science and an art. It is a very classical definition, which has been fashionable at a certain moment. So, astrology is more than ever behaving as an art, something with the opposition with technique. Technique gives you a result in terms of car, computer, machines. Art gives you a result in terms of pleasure, of seduction, of something you like it. So when an astrologer says that what he does works, it has to be taken in the sense of a work of art works, a painting works, a music works. It works on our feelings. We like it, we want it, we identify ourselves with it. This is the result of astrology. So to end this little lecture on French astrology, we have also a transformation of the conferences. Conferences in France started in 1974. There were no conference in Paris between 1953 and 1974. And between 1974 and 1995, there were a majority in Paris of conference of people who were making research, who were dealing with research, and these conferences were limited to people of that sort. It was not open to students, in principle. Starting from 1990, changed. You see, the things changed, and conferences were with more people people paying more, and especially with a lot of students of astrology. These conferences were, in many cases, organized by teachers of astrology. It was sort of association of teachers, in a certain way, formally or not, who would organize these conferences for 300, 400 people, and it was not the place for discussions and for research. It was the place to learn more astrology, to get more astrology, to be more knowledgeable about astrology, what it is, but this was not any longer a time for research conferences. It was a time for conferences who would be integrated in the course of astrological classes. And we have a certain debt, in any way, towards English astrology and German astrology, because the conferences were much more active at the beginning of the 70s in England and in Germany than in France. But starting from 1974, the situation changed radically, and we in France became a major power in astrological research, especially Paris, but not only Paris. And French astrology was integrated, French astrological movement was integrated in the Northern European movement. And in many cases, there were 1 week after the conferences in England, there was a conference in Brussels or a conference in Paris that I organized in my own structure, the MAU, Mouvement Astrologique Unifié. So, in many cases, people would attend 1 week England, 1 week France or Belgium. That was the golden age of astrology. Many astrologers. There was a very interesting case in Brussels in 1980 when most speakers were not French speakers. So we had to translate what they would say in other languages. And one of the most striking cases of our presence in Europe was the conference in London in 1981, 200 years after the discovery of Uranus. It was organized in London, in the center of London, in St. John's Wood, Avenue Road, during 1 week at the former Cambodian embassy. And I think in a certain way, it was the first time there was an important conference in astrology in London, and not in the province, not in the regional, not outside London, like as it was the tradition with the Astrological Association, who would locate their conferences in Sussex or anywhere else, but not in London. Afterwards, they did things in London, like in 1992. But you see, so not only did we organize things in Paris, but we French astrologers organized things in Belgium, in Luxembourg, in England, in south of France, in Israel, in Athens, etc. That was the years, let's say, 1974 to 1982, more or less. Very intense international movement and activity. And from this point of view also, at the end of the 80s, there was a decline of astrology in France from the point of view of the northern astrology. Paris stopped to be a major international and European and even world center, to be more limited in its scope. As a matter of fact, you probably heard of the creation in 2000 of a Federation of Mediterranean Astrology, FAES, Fédération des Astrologues d'Europe du Sud, which would include Spain and Italy and France and Greece, not Israel. And, well, it was a sort of admission that there was a sort of gap between northern astrology and southern astrology. And, well, there has been some result with this federation at the beginning of the 21st century. And I won't insist on that. So my conclusion is, and I would like very much to hear what is the situation in other countries, which I cannot judge very well. There was a decline of French astrology in terms of image, in terms of content, and astrology, and in terms of newcomers. If you attend today French astrological meetings in Lyon, in Bordeaux, in Paris, which are three annual important affairs, although in Paris it is not so regular now. But there is some, I'm not speaking of conferences, I'm speaking of regular meetings, including conferences. You will see that the great majority of people in the audience are women and are people above, I would say, 55, 60 years old. And among the leaders of the astrological movements, you will not find young people like I was when I created the MAU in 1975. I was only 27 years old. So there is nothing of that sort today, because, well, we could imagine a sort of young wolf coming and organized and knowing to do things, publishing things, and would appear in 2014 and become a new leader of the astrological world. No, it doesn't happen. Most leaders today were born in the 40s, 46, 45, 47, like me, like Lenoble, like Charvet, like Alain de Chivray, and there are some a younger generation of 10 years who were born in the 50s, like Roger Kay, like Samuel Jean Gutenberg, like Daniel Kobe, like Denis Labouret, but they do not really have the energy to become real leaders in the astrological field. So we don't know what will be the future of French astrology, and it's possible that the people who have some expectation of making research will have to emigrate.